Past week, I went up to see my son. Driving over Powell's Mountain, I noticed the leaves. They have turned, and they were breathtaking. They was just beautiful. Oftentimes, my wife will ask me. She'll say, "What kind of tree is that?" I don't know trees very well. I know the basic trees, an oak tree, a maple tree, but a lot of trees I don't know. And so many times I tell her I'm not sure. You know, in West Virginia, I read there are over 50 different types of trees. There's a lot of trees. And they turn at different times in the fall, and it's just beautiful. Fall is I think maybe my favorite time of the year. I like all seasons, but I especially like fall. I even like winter. But I don't know the types of trees, just a very few. I know fruit trees. You know fruit trees. How do we know fruit trees? We know fruit trees by the fruit that they bear. Jesus talks about a good tree bearing good fruit. My family, my relatives, most of them, the jobs they had was either in the coal mines or in the woods, the lumber industry. My uncle, he knows all the trees. He worked at a lumber mill for 58 years. He was a lumber grader. He estimated the value of timber. He knew what timber was worth. He was a lumber grader in Raynell for 50 years. My mom's brother's name was Chip. He was a lumber grader at Cherry River Booman Lumber Company in Richwood all his life. And to this very day, his son works at the Cherry River Booman Lumber Company in Richwood, and he is a lumber grader. They know the value of timber. They know what's valuable, and they know what's not valuable. They were lumber graders. I don't know the trees, or I don't know timber, but one of the favorite times in my childhood is when we went to my grandmother's to cut wood. It was always in the fall. We would drive to my grandmother's house, and we'd let the women out to go into my grandmother's. We wouldn't go in, because if we went in there, we would be in there an hour or two talking. So we went straight to the forest to cut wood. My Uncle Tarzan, he was there. My dad was there. Burl was there. And I was there. Every year we did the same thing. Tarzan, a big, strong, powerful, dominant man. Dominant. He dominated everything. He would get out of the truck, and we'd get out of the truck, and we would follow him. And he'd come up on a tree, and he'd look at the tree, and he'd say, "Let's take that one down. Let's take that one down." And just as soon as he'd say that, he'd look at my dad. Sometimes my dad would agree, and sometimes my dad would say no. And when my dad would say no, me and Burl would just sit down, because we knew there was a debate that was about to happen. Eventually, they'd come to a compromise, and they would take the tree down. My uncle was big. Tarzan was big. He carried a big chainsaw. I didn't want to have anything to do with a chainsaw. I couldn't even lift his chainsaw. But he would take the tree down. He took all kinds of trees down in his life, and he could make that tree fall anywhere. He would cut the tree down. Burl carried a little chainsaw, and he would go and he would trim it up and cut it into blocks. My dad would sit there and watch, and he would consult on different things. In other words, he would say, do it this way, do it that way. I would pick the blocks up and load it in the truck. Well, after we did that one, we'd go further into the woods, and Tarzan would look up and he'd say, let's take that one down. And my dad would say, no. And I'd look at Burl, and Burl would wink at me. And we would sit down, and they would go at it. I mean, they would argue for 15 or 20 minutes over that tree. And they would get mad at each other. I mean, very mad at each other. Not close to a fist fight or anything like that, but boy, they would disagree, and it was something to see. And eventually my dad would say, Jackson, let's let that one go till next year. Next year we'll look at that tree again and we'll talk about it again. And that seemed to satisfy both parties. And we'd go about our business of the day. And of an evening, we'd go back to my grandmother's house, and they would have a big meal. Now, I'm telling you what, I'm talking about a big meal. Now, we'd been in the woods all day working. And you talk about hungry, we were hungry. And we would go in there, and we would eat like nobody's business. It was all home-cooked food, and it was wonderful. Cooked on a wood stove. It was wonderful. And all the parties that disagreed, everything was okay. Everything was okay. You wouldn't have believed that earlier in the day, but evening meal, everything was okay. Jesus tells stories like this about everyday life. And you know, some of them are easy to understand. You can get the meaning. You know the meaning. There's no question. But other stories he tells, you have to think about them and think about what they mean in your life. He tells a story about a fig tree. The owner of the land goes to a fig tree and he tries to find figs. He tries to find fruit. And he says for 3 years he went to that fig tree and he couldn't find any fruit. He goes to the gardener and he says, cut this tree down. Take this tree down. It is not serving any purpose. It is taking up soil and water, and it has no figs. And the gardener says this. He says, let's wait a year. And during that year, I will fertilize, I will water the tree, I will take care of it. And then when we come back next year, if it has no figs, then we'll cut it down. Now, the way I interpret that parable is the owner of the garden, the owner of the land, is God. Dominant, powerful, all-knowing, in control. The owner of the garden is God. The gardener is Jesus. Jesus intercedes. Jesus intercedes for us with God. He speaks in our behalf. And the tree is us. The tree is us. Jesus intercedes with God. He takes up for us. He stands with us. You know, I've always thought about this idea of bearing fruit. Bearing fruit. I've been in the ministry over 30 years, and I think about, have I bared fruit? I don't have people lined up to be baptized. I don't have people lined up to get into the doors of the church. Have I bared fruit? Maybe you've thought of that question too. But you know, many things we do not see. We do not see the effect we have upon people. And maybe our effect will not be felt by those people until long after we're gone. But I know this: if you believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, if you tell the stories of Jesus, if you talk about his life, his death, his resurrection, if you talk about his saving grace, if you talk about his love for you, if you talk about a home that he has made for you, if you tell those stories to people, you have bared fruit. Amen.